Good evening. Hi, Anita.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Are we waiting for Raja Krishnadev Raya to join us? Good evening, Raja and Rani.
One second, I'm just joining.
Hello. Good evening. I've got a cup of coffee to keep me company.
Oh, you think you're the only one?
Oh, okay. Cheers. Since we're from coffee country.
Unfortunately, I'm having tea. We can't hear you. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, I can hear you. I can't hear Rani.
Maybe a little further volume.
Have fun.
No, this is Ratna.
Oh, we have some intruders.
Yes.
Session bombing happening here. Welcome, Lakshmi and Ritu.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes.
Very well.
Hi, Ratna.
Hello.
So, Raja Krishnadev Raya will join us shortly.
I think we've got a minute to.
We do, so we can chat, no problem.
Yeah. Looks like it's going to rain this side of town.
Looks like that here too.
You're getting rich.
Which is this?
All right. We can't see Rajmata.
Yeah, there she is.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here, an MC for this session, to introduce the moderator who will moderate the session. Anita Sethi, a good friend, is a foodie, is an entrepreneur uh, from the hospitality industry. And I think as a foodie and the chapter chair of All Bangalore Gourmet, she's the best person to have moderate this session on kitchen cabinet or royal affair. I welcome Rajmata Chandrakanta Devi, Raja Krishna Dev Raya, and Rani Ratnasri Raya to the session.
Are we live?
Yes, you are
Very
live.
nice.
We are
Namaste,
live.
namaste.
Hello.
And yes, I must mention here that I happened to study in where the Vijayanagar Empire was in Hospet for 5 years. And that is how your sister was my classmate in school. And privilege. Over to you, Anita. I will come in 5 minutes before the session ends. That will
Sure.
be a cue for you
Okay.
to
Start winding up.
start winding down. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Good evening. It's indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be, the moderator for this show and for this program this evening. And I totally am into, food and cuisine and royal cuisine, obviously more so. So I take this opportunity to talk to Rajmata Chandrakanta Devi, Raja Krishna Devaraya, and Rani Ratnashri Raya also. Now, they are the descendants of the erstwhile Vijayanagar dynasty of Hampi. It was famed, I believe, that the roads of Vijayanagar were lined with gold. I wish I lived in that century, but alas, not like that anymore. And I'd like to begin with a brief introduction of Raja Krishna Devaraya. So Raja Krishna Devaraya belongs to the Aravidu dynasty of the Vijayanagar Empire. He is the 19th generation from the great King Krishna Devaraya, whom he is named after, and who ruled from 1509 to 1529. He did his schooling from Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, Pondicherry, and his BE Mechanical from BIET, Davangere. He worked for 7 years in Washington, D.C., and came back in 2008 after his father passed away. He has restored his palace in Anegundi which is more than 250 years old, using the traditional methods of lime and mortar. In fact, I was so excited because I've been to Hampi and it's been one of the most enchanting trips that I took. I was spellbound by the place. You know, as you arrive, the big sort of gate made with the boulders, and then the palaces or the lotus pavilions, and the temples, and the musical pillars. And I mean, you can just go on and on about Hampi, and you can't do a trip to Hampi in a day or 2 or 3. I probably would like to spend a week there. And Hampi is one of our most historical destinations, I would think, and one of the best in Karnataka. So over to Raja Krishna Deva Raya, who will give us a intro into his kingdom.
Namaskar. Good evening to everybody. It's a great honor and a privilege to be here at the Women Economic Forum today. You've invited me for what my ancestors have done 500 years back. So let me just give you a brief history of the Vijayanagar Empire. As you've already mentioned, I'm the 19th descendant from Sri Krishna Deva Raya, and I belong to the last dynasty, the Aravidu dynasty. Vijayanagar Empire was established by Harihara and Gupta in the year 1336 with the blessings of Sri Vidyaranya Swamiji. There were totally 4 dynasties that ruled: the Sangama, the Saluva, the Tuluva, and the Aravidu. Sri Krishna Deva Raya of the Tuluva dynasty was the greatest ruler of this empire. He ruled from 1509 to 1529. And during his time, Vijayanagar reached its zenith. Krishna Deva Raya ranks among the mighty emperors along with Ashoka, Samudragupta, and Harshvardhan. His rule marked the grand period in development of the empire and the successful achievement of the object for which this empire was established. Vijayanagar Empire was founded to protect the Hindu Dharma. The underlying principle in protecting was not only Hindu religion, but also to protect all sects, faith, and to provide freedom of religious worship, which is the essence of Hinduism. So the Vijayanagar kings, all the kings, right from the foundation of the empire, pursued this noble policy. There were a lot of travelers who came to Vijayanagar during those days. One of them from Persia, Abdul Razak, who visited in the 15th century. His words when he saw Vijayanagar Empire. So he says, the city of Vijayanagar is such that the pupil of the eye has never seen a place like it, and the ear of intelligence has never been informed that there existed anything to equal in the world. And as you are mentioning that jewels and diamonds and everything were sold on the streets. Yes, indeed, during those days, in front of the Vithala Bazaar, you had piles of jewelries, the precious stones and all. So people would sell them. So at the end of the day, they would just cover it with a cloth and go home. Oh. Nobody would steal anything. Just imagine those days, people were very honest. And also, if there was any theft or anything, the police had to catch them within a stipulated time, say 1 week or 10 days. If they were not able to catch it, then they would punish the police.
Okay.
That was something which was very good during those days. And there's a lot about the empire, but I'll just tell you in brief. So finally, in 1565, the Battle of Talikota took place, where the 5 Bahmani Sultans, they attacked the Vijayanagar army. Yes. Though the army was much bigger than the Bahmani Sultans' army put together, what happened was there were 2 Muslim generals in the Vijayanagar army, each with about 80,000 soldiers under them. And they betrayed and they switched over sides, and they killed Aliya Ram Raya. So as soon as the king was dead, the morale of the army was totally lost, and Vijayanagara fell. For almost 6 months, Hampi was looted, it was burnt. What happened after this was, our family, they moved to Penagunda, that's in Andhra Pradesh, yes, near Anantapur. So we ruled there till about 1594, I think. And then from there, we went to Chandragiri. We were in Chandragiri for almost till 1645 or so. Then we were in Vellore in Tamil Nadu, and then finally we came back and settled in Anagundi. So after that, in the year 1824, the Britishers took over Hampi from our family. And because of that, they used to give us a pension of about 2,000 rupees during those days, 2,000 rupees per month, which I have seen the records in 1902. My great-grandfather, he used to get 500 rupees pension. That pension continued all the way till 1984 when my grandmother passed away. She was the last Rani at the time of independence. So at the time of independence, my grandfather, his name was Darbar Raja Krishnadeva Raya. So he was the king, and but at that time, Anagundi had become a very, very small. It had hardly 10 villages under it. It was like we were like a Jagir, and we came under the Nizam of Hyderabad.
Right.
And now after that, now I'll just tell you a bit about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've already mentioned, I did my schooling in Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Pondicherry, and then I did my BE Mechanical. After that, just after that, I used to see my dad. He would always say that we have to preserve our culture, our tradition. And those days I really didn't understand much. So then finally, in 2002, I got a chance to go to America. I worked there for about almost 7 years. So the company I used to work was a construction company. So I would just observe things over there. There were few places where if the building was say 100 years, that neighborhood had to be protected. There were strict rules and regulations. You couldn't build a modern structure next to it. It had to resemble the existing structures that were there. So this stuck me. And one thing that you need to appreciate about America is they document everything properly, and also they're very proud of whatever they have. Their history is not even 300 years, whereas I can go 500 years. I can name my father's father. We can go back 500 years. So this thing stuck me. I said, when I go back to India, I need to preserve. I need to do something for my culture. So the first thing I took up was the restoration of my house, the house in Anagundi. Actually, the house that we are living in, we moved into this house in the late, I think, 1780s or 90s, when the main palace, the Anagundi Palace, was destroyed by Tipu Sultan. He had asked his people to light it up. They put it on fire, and the palace got burned down.
That is the 7-story palace.
Yeah, that was a very old. Some say it is 7, some say it is 3-story.
Okay.
But the walls are, you have to see these walls, minimum 3 to 4 feet thick walls are there. The walls in our house, the existing house, the exterior walls are all 3 feet thick, and the interior, the smallest, is 2 feet thick.
Wow.
So you can imagine how big the walls are. So after coming back, it almost took me, and I was very particular that I have to do it the traditional way. I did not use concrete, I did not use cement, no rods, nothing. I found an architect, because he was my friend, he's from Pondicherry, he's in Auroville, Dharmesh Jadeja. And then to get the right person to do this work took me 2 years. Finally, I think in 2011, I started the work. And when I started, I thought probably a year or two I'll be done with the house. But then this is a totally different ball game. Doing it in lime and mortar and all, the Madras terrace, the roofing. When you come here, I'll show you all the details, how it has been done. So finally, I started this work. I started loving the way it was coming. So then I said, let me do it. I'm doing it once. Since this house has already lasted more than 200 years, if I do it, even if it lasts, say, 100 years, I'm passing down something to the future generation.
Legacy,
they can be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
So even now, 2016, I completed the work. So it just took a little over 5 years. After that, now whenever I go to Anagundi, I see school kids who have come to Anagundi, who are staying on a visit, or some architects. I call them in, I talk to them, and I try to inspire them in my own little way. so that at least they are inspired and they feel proud of what culture we come from. Like
Right.
one thing I always tell, if we do not preserve our tradition and culture, nobody else will. This, we have to do it. Everybody is proud of what their background is. Why should we not be proud of our culture?
And we have such a rich and yeah, varied and
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to actually go back. We have to read our history, not just 500 years. We have to go back 1,500 years, how we were during that time. Yeah, Srinivas Reddy. I need to read that book.
So are you going to be writing any book about the history of your family or the place or the food?
Actually, there is a lot that has to be done. Right now, I'm thinking of documenting what I have done, how I did this restoration work and all.
Right.
Yes, I need to write the history. In fact, a few months back in February, when I was in London, I'd gone to the British Library.
Right.
I tried to get some information. So in 1800, there was one Mackenzie who had come to Anegundi and he had met one of my great-grandfathers. So he has documented everything quite nicely. So I want to take all the references and then come up with some book so that the future generation is inspired.
Right, right. In fact, a lot of documentation is done by, you know, people from other countries, and we haven't done so much. So in fact, now is a good time to, you know, get everything in order and all the research. And we'd love to see a book coming out by the family itself. So we'll get the, you know, real story as to what, you know, conspired and had happened. Right.
Thank you.
So you were telling us that, you know, Anegundi actually is older than Hampi to begin with.
Yes, actually, people, Anegundi has been habited, like people have been living there for more than 1,000 years.
Wow.
When Vijayanagar Empire was started, initially the kings ruled from Anegundi, then they built Hampi and they moved over to Hampi.
Okay.
Once Hampi was destroyed, we came back and settled in Anegundi. So you will see these in inscriptions, you will find sometimes the Vijayanagara kings. When it mentions the Vijayanagara kings, it is prior to the Battle of Talikota.
Right, right.
Before 1565. And then in most of the inscriptions, you'll see Anegundi Rajas. That is after the Battle of Talikota.
Right, right. So in fact, even Girish Karnad's last play, which was held in Bangalore sometime last year after his passing, unfortunately,
I heard
was the crossing to Talikota, and it was done so beautifully. So there's so much of charm and, you know, history over there, and it's totally enchanting. And we all want to know more and see more, and you know, come and see the place and see read books about it. So I've actually got myself this book, The Raya. And of course,
reading books is okay, you will get inspired, but once you come here,
come and see, yes,
totally mesmerized. It's such a beautiful place, I tell you.
Right.
And you need to have minimum 3-4 days. You can spend few days in Hampi on the other side of the river, and few days here in Anegundi. There are a lot of hills. There is the Anjani Parvat. This Anegundi area is also known as Kishkinda. This is where Hanuman lived. This is where Hanuman was born. There's this Anjani Parvat. And then where there's one place called Yantrodharaka, in right very close to the Virupaksha temple. That is where Hanuman had the darshan of Sri Ram and Lakshman for the very first time. So there is a temple there. Vyasaraya had built a temple. Now Vyasaraya was the guru of Sri Krishna Deva Raya. You have to notice, any great king, what I have seen, always had the blessings of a saint. Only then they became so great. Even you can say Shivaji Maharaj. Shivaji Maharaj, when he was young, he heard the stories about Vijayanagar and he got inspired by Vijayanagar and he built such a big empire.
Right. So now we are eager to know more about the food aspects and the cuisine of the Vijayanagar, you know, kings. What were they eating then? So I think we'll move on to our next, you know, to the Rani.
Yeah, I'm actually lucky, you know. When I was a kid, my sister was a very good cook, so I never had to enter the kitchen. And then when I got married, my wife
is a very good
excellent cook. So
right.
Now she'll tell you about the.
So I'll just give a brief introduction. Rani Ratnashree Raya has done her BCom and BA, and she got married in the year 2000. Her passion in education are education and cooking. So these two areas, and she is actively involved with Deepayana English Medium School in Hospet, and which was started 50 years ago by Rajmata herself. And she is a strong support system in the endeavors of her husband and mother-in-law. And I see the lovely twins and the young prince as well. So yeah, so over to you. Please tell us, Rani ji, about the cuisine and what are the traditions that come down from there. What are the things that you all still continue? Perhaps about the vessels, and you were telling me about some tiffin box. So I leave it all to you. It's the ball is in your court.
Can you hear?
No, we can't hear. Maybe she's on mute.
Right. No, we cannot hear you.
Do you want to say something? So we'll see if we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes, here you are. Namaste.
Sorry about that. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today, this evening. As you said, I got married in the year
Ratna,
2000.
you have to come a bit closer. We can't hear you.
Your laptop.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
When you're closer to it, we're hearing you better.
You hear me now? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. I think.
So tell us all about the gourmet experiences of the Vijayanagar Empire.
Oh, well, I was always intrigued as to how the royal cuisine would be when I got. And when I got married and happened to visit, well, and when
Maybe the volume.
I think. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hear me now, Anita? Is it clear? The audio?
Yeah, better.
Yeah. So when I visited the royal kitchen, the old kitchen, when I entered, when Ma took me there and showed it in the old palace, so that was where this entire show was done. I think in the Lost Recipes, I was talking about it.
Yes,
So
I think I've seen the video.
yeah, that day we happened to pick out a few of the old vessels, and we had cooked in those vessels. And when I started off and had a look at the entire vessels that were kept, the huge utensils. If you can just have a look at it, and as I sent the pictures, if you had a look at those pictures. So I was just discussing, then Ma was telling me that it was in these utensils the food was cooked during Rani Kupamasa, who was my husband's great grandmother.
Right.
And I used to just imagine, how so huge vessels and utensils they used to cook the dishes and all. And
What was the material of the vessels? I mean, what metal was it?
It's copper.
Copper, okay. So that's supposed to be good for food, right?
And I was told that, the meal was cooked for around 100 people.
Wow.
Who are relatives who used to have a meal in Anagandi. And this went on till she was alive. And then when I started discussing about this, I happened to meet a few, elder people who are still alive, even Krishna's grandma. And when I asked her, what were the dishes that were cooked and all, so usually she said that most of it would be vegetarian, Till Krishna's grandfather was alive, non-veg was cooked at home. But after that, because my father-in-law wasn't fond of non-veg, so not much of non-veg was cooked.
Okay.
And there was this beautiful, hunting experience that was narrated to me.
Uh-huh.
One of our relatives in Anagindi.
Right.
That they used to hunt and cook wild boar. So
Okay.
that recipe also was very interesting. Though I have substituted and cooked it because I am fond of cooking, so I have substituted it and kind of tried it out with chicken. So
Okay.
that was very an interesting recipe that we tried out. And because we have people who don't eat non-veg, there's this very I would say unique and very tasty, delicious recipe that my mother-in-law passed on to me, which was cooked with banana flour and with the masalas and everything. It used to resemble like a fish curry. Most of the people confuse it to be a fish rather than the banana flour. And of course, the famous kathal biryani, which looks very much like,
My mouth is watering already.
So, an interesting aspect about the recipes that I was just looking into was when any new member of the family entered, so she would bring in a special flavor, ingredient, or her touch to all these dishes. So I could see in Anagandi, because those dishes are still cooked. So as such, people have not kind of, forgotten those recipes. There
Right.
are lots of recipes which are still cooked in Anagandi. And interestingly, it has been passed on from generation to generation, and that is why none of those recipes have been forgotten. So, whenever there is something, and one more thing is people, even now, our relatives,
Uh-huh.
like if something has to be cooked in bulk or the some chutneys to be made, which they are special, I mean, which is their specialty, my mother-in-law would still calls them and they come and make those chutneys at home. Uh,
Wow.
that is still there. That's been a very interesting aspect. And because it was under Nizams, so we have the Mughal influence also in the dishes. Because my mother-in-law and mother-in-law's mother-in-law is from Madhya Pradesh, we have that influence also in the kitchen, in the royal kitchen. And the cuisine is kind of spread out, you can say, with vegetarian, non-vegetarian, North Indian, South Indian
A lot
dishes.
of variety I can see.
Yes, lot of variety. And it's been like interesting when I even look at the festivals that are celebrated and the special dishes that are cooked on each festival. For example, Ram Navami, we have dal bati,
Uh-huh.
which is made, which we still continue to do it. And then during Dashera, there are set of recipes which are cooked on each day. Dashera is again an elaborate festival with the Devi Puja and all the recipes that are cooked during those time are particularly Puran Poli, the Bengal sabji, the Chitrana be it, what we call it in the south. So all the payasam which is made with interesting aspect about the payasam was like usually we make it with the chana dal and the rice, gold, ghee, and the jaggery part. But here it was, I was told that the rice was soaked overnight and then it was grinded and then cooked. So
Okay.
that was something a little different, which
Like
is
a firni almost.
yeah, yeah, firni with chana dal and gold, ghee.
Mm-hmm.
That was very interesting, which I came across. And other than that, even till today, I think we have been following all the customs, rituals. Maybe not in the scale that it was before, but because of my in-laws' blessings, both my father-in-law and mother-in-law, the entire utensils, the way they had preserved it is amazing, which now adds an aesthetic value to the palace that is restored by Krishna. So we have used the entire thing, even the big parat, huge parat in which the atta was kind of, the dough was made. So we
Okay.
have used that and display. and we have this beautiful hot pack, brass hot pack.
Ah,
So it's like the old traditional hot pack wherein charcoal was put in the bottom vessel, and we had all stacked one on the top to make it like a tiffin carrier. And then we have this.
could be taken on travels or while they were hunting or anything.
So even we have this huge chanch maker, the buttermilk maker with the huge pot and the mathani. So it's like, all these things were very much, in use. It is not something that you can only display. That is the best part. All these things, even today, can be used.
So
That
you've
is
kept
how
the traditions alive at Anegundi of the old Vijayanagar Empire. That's really lovely to know. And I hope that you'll be bringing out a cookbook perhaps with all these beautiful recipes that we are all dying to try out all across India and the world, as there's an audience from all across who are listening in on us. And this has been one of the most popular WEF transmissions today, I think, and I hope. But anyhow, so thank you so much for giving us such a in-depth insight into all the culinary traditions of the empire and bringing us up to date till now. And I think we'll speak a little to Rajmata ji. I'll just give a small introduction and then we'll move on. So Rajmata Chandrakanta Devi Raya hails from the royal family of Narsingarh near Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. So she brings her traditions also to the Vijayanagar Empire. And she married Raja Achyuta Devaraya in 1965. And she's actively involved towards the service to the society. She's a member of the Arpita Association, which started Deepayana School 50 years ago. Wow, that was a pioneering effort by her. And she's also the vice president at the national level of the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So, नमस्ते राजमाता जी, आपसे अभी हम बात करेंगे. आप जरा हमें बताइए कि विजयनगर में आप आए और अपने साथ क्या लेके आए मध्य प्रदेश से, आपका खाना पीना और वहाँ के रीति रिवाज, या आपने यहाँ के खुद अपनाए. आप जरा प्लीज हमें बताइए.
जरूर. सुनाई दे रहा है आपको? आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
बहुत अच्छी तरह से.
अच्छा. हाँ, तो मैं मध्य प्रदेश में मालवा प्रांत से हूँ. उज्जैन का जो वो है भाग, उसको मालवा प्रांत कहते हैं. इंदौर, भोपाल, उज्जैन, ये सब. तो मैं मालवा प्रांत से हूँ. मेरी मातृभाषा भी मालवी है.
अच्छा.
और मैं सम्राट विक्रमादित्य के परमार वंश से हूँ. नरसिंहगढ़ और राजगढ़ दो रियासतें परमार वंश की हैं, जो सम्राट विक्रमादित्य के परमार वंश से हम लोग संबंध रखते हैं. तो मैं वहां से जब आई, उसके पहले 1933 में मेरी बुआ जी की यहाँ शादी हुई थी. उनका यहाँ विवाह हुआ था. मेरे ससुर जी, उनका नाम दरबार श्री कृष्णदेव राया था. तो वहाँ उसी समय से ही यहाँ पर काफी कुछ वहाँ का इन्फ्लुएंस हो गया था, क्योंकि बाद में मेरे ससुर जी की जो दूसरे नंबर भाई थे, उनका विवाह भी मध्य प्रदेश में ही हुआ. वो भी दूर के रिश्ते में मेरी बुआ लगती थी. तो काफी कुछ वहाँ का खान पान, रीति रिवाज थोड़े थोड़े यहाँ पर आए हैं, लेकिन रीति रिवाज तो हम लोगों ने यही के अपनाए, वहाँ के यहाँ नहीं लाए. लेकिन फिर भी खान पान में असर तो आ ही जाता है, प्रभाव तो रहता ही है.
बिल्कुल.
तो हाँ, तो हम लोगों का राजस्थान से ज्यादा संबंध है वहाँ मध्य प्रदेश में. जितने भी शादी ब्याह वगैरह हुए ज्यादा करके राजस्थान से हैं, फिर हिमाचल प्रदेश से भी हैं, यूपी से भी है, फिर ऐसे उधर के ज्यादा थे. लेकिन मेरे बुआ जी का जब विवाह यहाँ हुआ, तब से फिर दक्षिण भारत का भी हमारा इन्फ्लुएंस हो गया. यहाँ पर मेरे ससुराल में ज्यादा करके रिश्तेदारी आंध्र प्रदेश की है और थोड़ी बहुत तमिलनाडु की भी है. तो मेरे घर में सभी मिक्स खाना बनता है. कभी आंध्र प्रदेश का बनता है, तो कभी तमिलनाडु का, तो ज्यादा करके मध्य प्रदेश का भी बनता है. और हमारा आनेगुंदी का स्पेशल है. वो जो आनेगुंदी का खाना है वैसे ही कर्नाटक का भी बनता है, लेकिन फिर भी आनेगुंदी का जो बनता है उसमें आपको मैं कुछ नाम बतलाती हूँ. जैसे कि उंटल पुलसू कहते हैं, वो तेलुगु नाम है ये उंटल पुलसू. एक्चुअली
क्या होता है वो?
उंटल पुलसू कुछ नहीं, सब दालों को मिक्स करके उबाल कर उनसे फिर पीस कर उनसे, जैसे गट्टे की सब्जी होती है ना राजस्थान में, हाँ उस टाइप का है. लेकिन 2-3 तरह की दालों को मिला के बनाया जाता है. थोड़ा मसाला अलग रहता है इसका. तो फिर यहाँ की मुंगेड़ी अलग टाइप रहती है. हमारे यहाँ जो वड़ी डालते हैं उसमें यहाँ की वड़ियों में थोड़ा फर्क रहता है. लेकिन यहाँ की वड़ी सहजन की फली, ड्रमस्टिक जिसको बोलते हैं ना, वो और बैंगन के साथ में मिला के बनाते हैं. वो भी बहुत अच्छी बनती है। और अभी
एक
मेरे
अंडे वाला जो था, आप
अंडे की रेसिपी,
उसका जरा आप बताएं जरा।
तो अंडे का कुछ भी नहीं है, अंडे को बहुत ध्यान से थोड़ा सा ऊपर से कवर उसका तोड़ना पड़ता है, फिर उसके अंदर वापस सारे मसाले डालते हैं और अच्छा से फेंट के उसको वापस उसमें भर के और फिर ऊपर से थोड़ा सा आटा चिपका देते ताकि वो बाहर नहीं निकले, और फिर उसको घास बिछा के पानी में उबालते हैं। जब वो पक जाता है तो वापस मसाला भून के और फिर उसमें उसको डालते हैं। ये है रेसिपी। जैसे हम लोग खाली अंडे बॉईल करके फिर उसकी सब्जी बनाते हैं, यहाँ पर क्या करते हैं कि वैसे भी बनाते हैं लेकिन इस टाइप से भी बनाते हैं, तो थोड़ा स्वाद में काफी फर्क पड़ जाता है।
ये बहुत ही अनोखा सा रेसिपी है, मैंने सुना है पहले।
ये आनेगुंदी की रेसिपी
ट्राई किया है, तो आपके आनेगुंदी का स्पेशल है ये।
हाँ, ये आनेगुंदी की रेसिपी है। और बता ही दिया बहुत कुछ, तो मेरी बहू ने आपको बता ही दिया। वैसे ज्यादा करके तो पूरन पूरी, कड़बू, और एक श्री कृष्ण के टाइम पर मंडगी बनती थी। वो मैंने एक बार एक सेमिनार अटेंड किया था विजयवाड़ा के पास में श्री श्रीकाकुलम में, तो वहाँ हिस्टोरियंस हम मेरे को और मेरे पति को, हम दोनों को बुलाया था, तो वो पूछ रहे थे कि इनमें से कोई चीज अभी भी आपके यहाँ बनती है क्या? तो मंडगी अभी भी बनती है, वो श्री कृष्ण के टाइम पे भी बनती थी मंडगी। तो वो घर पे जैसे वो मटके जैसे उल्टा करके और उसके ऊपर राइस का ऐसा पतला घोल बना के उसको पापड़ की जैसे उसको बना के फिर उसको दूध में और शक्कर डाल के खाते हैं। वो एक मिठाई है, तो वो अभी भी बनती है, जो श्री कृष्ण के जमाने में बनती है। ऐसे कुछ कुछ चीजें हैं जो ट्रेडिशनली चली आ रही हैं और वो बनती हैं।
अभी भूख लगने लगी है मुझे। काफी दूर है पर अभी से ही भूख लग रही है।
जी, और बोलिए आप।
आप पहले के जमाने में आप कहते थे कि कुछ भट्ट होते थे ना, अब नहीं है?
हाँ, नहीं, उस जमाने में मुझे लगता है सभी राजघरानों में होते होंगे। हमारे यहाँ तो थे राजभट्ट, वही भोजन बनाते थे। फिर धीरे धीरे वो सब चला गया। अब जैसे मेरे बुआ जी की जब विवाह हुआ था तो 5 घर आए थे काम वालों के उनके साथ में, किंतु फिर उनको यहाँ का रहन सहन, खान पान, भाषा का सबसे ज्यादा प्रभाव पड़ता है, उनको जमा नहीं, तो फिर धीरे धीरे वो लोग वापस चले गए। ऐसे ही मेरे और एक जो दूर के रिश्ते में बुआ जी लगती, उनके साथ भी आई थी फैमिली, लेकिन वो भी वापस चली गई। वो यहाँ का अपना नहीं सके, फिर हम लोगों ने यहाँ का अपना लिया, और फिर हमारे अपने बाल बच्चे सब है और हमारा घर है, तो हम लोग आराम से यहाँ रहते हैं अभी। ऐसे घर में जब से हिंदी बोली जाती है, वैसे हमारी मातृभाषा तेलुगु है, मैंने तेलुगु भी सीख ली है, कन्नड़ भी सीख ली, वो अलग बात है, किंतु घर में बच्चों के साथ हम लोग हिंदी में ही बात करते हैं।
तो अभी जो छोटी लड़कियां हैं वो भी थोड़ा दिलचस्पी लेते हैं क्या किचन में, या उनको पिज्जा और पास्ता या ऐसी चीजें पसंद है, या उनको?
नहीं, ऐसी भी पसंद है, और थोड़ी बहुत अभी बहुत छोटी है लेकिन फिर भी
छोटी हैं।
हाँ, हम जो भी बनाते हैं ना तो हमारे साथ बैठती हैं, देखती हैं और थोड़ा बहुत करती हैं। जैसे रामनवमी पे हमारे यहाँ दाल बाटी बनती है, उनको बहुत पसंद है दाल बाटी, मेरे पोते को और मेरी पोतियों को, बच्चों को, सबको ही पसंद है। इवन आने में सभी लोगों को पसंद, सच कहना चाहूँ मैं आपसे तो दाल बाटी चूरमा बनता है। फिर गट्टे की सब्जी भी बहुत पसंद से खाते हैं, पतोड़ की सब्जी खाते हैं। तो यहाँ वहाँ की सब्जियां भी यहाँ लोग बहुत शौक से खाते हैं, और यहाँ की सब्जियां बनती हैं हमारे घर में। वहाँ के कुछ पुलाव हैं जो बनते हैं, जैसे अखनी का पुलाव है, वो सब बनते हैं। तो यहाँ का वहाँ का मिक्स रहता है, लेकिन लोग जो भी ये बनता है बहुत शौक से खाते हैं। मतलब मेरे रिश्तेदार भी अच्छे से खाते हैं, उनको भी बहुत पसंद आता है। जैसे अपने गेहूं के आटे का हलवा, मूंग की दाल का हलवा, वो सब बहुत शौक से खाते हैं यहाँ पर लोग। मैसूर पाक के साथ में बेसन चक्की भी खाते हैं।
आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह से विस्तार में पूरा समझाया है कि क्या खाते हैं लोग वहाँ कैसे, और पूरे ट्रेडिशंस जो हैं। तो थैंक यू, और I'll get back to Raja Devaraya, and do tell us a little bit about, say, the festivals that you have, that are still continued. You were talking about the Rath Yatra, the Rath, this thing in Hampi and in Anegundi. So do tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I came back after my father passed away is we still follow a lot of traditions, and I did not want to break that. So every year, my father would take part in the Hampi Rathotsav, the Anagundi Rathotsav during Dasara time and all. There are a lot of festivals that he used to take part. So right now I am also continuing all that. Hampi, it is just a one day. When the main chariot is pulled, then I go and call the Swamiji, and then we pull the chariot first. So that's something which has been going on for traditions. But one thing you have to, in Anagundi, we have a few Muslim population also. And even when they have their festival, some Eid or anything, after they finish the namaz, they come home, they pay the respects to our family, then they go to my uncle's family, then one more family, and then they go back home. So this is just not our tradition, like our Hindu festivals. Even the Muslims, when they have their festivals, they come and they pay the respect. So this, I have not seen anywhere else this thing. So in Anagundi, of course, whatever the festivals that I do take part, that is elaborate, a 5-day affair and all. But one thing that I have noticed is people are not very much interested in our festivals. This is something we need to change the attitude. We need to tell them the right reason why we celebrate, what is the reason. The younger generation these days, if you tell them exactly, I think
Rajesh,
they will appreciate it and they will start following it. So
that email ID, no?
We need to learn everything properly and then teach it to our kids.
Right.
Okay.
And, tell me, I believe the
Can I give you Lumina's number, because I'm actually going live in a minute?
Has been very popular.
You can message her.
The Mysore Dasara,
okay, thanks.
Which is popular now, used to be.
She will message her.
Hampi is what I believe.
Yeah, actually, the Dasara festival during the Vijayanagar time, Dasara was the main festival. It used to take place near the Mahanami Dibba in Hampi.
Hello.
So once the Vijayanagar Empire, they lost the Bahmani Sultan after 1565, then later on this tradition was moved to Mysore. So now the Mysore Maharajas, they do it in a very grand way. So that actually had started in Vijayanagar in Hampi.
Right. That's very interesting. That's something that started somewhere, is not practiced there anymore, but it's moved on to another place. It's and tell us, the name itself. So Hampi had a lot of. I remember seeing the elephant stables over there. So and elephants are very revered in that time frame. And Anegundi also has the name itself.
Yes. Ane itself means elephant in Kannada.
Right. So even the boulders, some of them actually, to me, looked like big elephants standing.
This landscape, I tell you, though the hills are very, very small, not very big, it's so beautiful. You have to visit. Whoever is listening to this,
right.
Hampi should be on your list. You have to come and see Hampi, Anagundi once. Here, not only, of course, the temples, it's all spread over 42 square kilometers. The wildlife is also very good. Here you have the bear sanctuary. This is the only bear sanctuary in India where you have the sloth bear. You can see every day, you can see bears. Even in my farm, almost every other day, you can see bears. There are leopards nearby. You have crocodiles. You name it, all the animals are also here. So if you're interested in wildlife, even for that, you can come here.
Yeah. And also now there are vineyards nearby. The Chrisma vineyards are there and the wineries. So people can come and experience, make a circuit so they can see wildlife, they can see architecture, history, everything, and, go check out.
I would like to differ here. For me, Hampi is not a tourist place, okay? It's a Punya Kshetra.
Okay.
So wine, non-veg, all this, I think in that area, don't do it. Of course, you can do it always back in the hotel and you can enjoy it.
Right.
But wherever you go, you have to appreciate the tradition. Yeah, you have to
look into the historic significance of each place.
Yes.
So actually, people can't just come for a day or so and run away. They need to come and immerse themselves in the history and culture.
2 to 5 days.
Right.
Then you can really enjoy it.
In fact, though I've been there, I hadn't gone to Anegundi. So the next time round, which hopefully I will, after hearing about so much that you've done there, I want to come and see. So then one needs to come and see Anegundi and then the whole, the whole 9 yards, as they would
Please
say.
do come.
So this has been
Anytime.
a beautiful session. Thank you so much for each of you, giving us a little snippet about your, the way you see your family background, history, culture, cuisine, and everything. It's been a well-rounded session. Thank you very much. And it's really indeed been a pleasure to moderate the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, Anita. And before I announce the award, I must apologize that my system went unmuted for a bit, and I think I interrupted your conversation. I apologize for that. And it is now my privilege on behalf of WEF 2020 to announce the iconic Woman Creating a Better World for All award on Rajmata Chandrakanta Devi. I would like to announce the award of Iconic Leader Creating a Better World for All on Raja Krishna Deva Raya. The Iconic Woman Creating a Better World for All on Rani Ratnashri Raya. And the Iconic Woman Leader Creating a Better World for All on Anita Sethi. Thank you so much. Such a privilege to have you on our session here and to hear all about Hampi, Anegundi, and the work that you have done. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Have a good day. The award will be sent to you by email, a soft copy, because we cannot, in the current scenario, send a hard copy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very nice.
Hi.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, very well.
Such a pleasure to have you here.
It's totally
Suchitra,
my pleasure.
Suchitra, unfortunately, is on another session which got delayed.
Yes.
So I think we will start and she'll
Okay.
probably join us. Yeah? And so
Sure.
it is my pleasure to and privilege to have you here with us today. I will ask you to introduce yourself because I think you will do a better job of it than I will. Just a brief
Sure.
introduction I will give is that you are known for your Pichwai paintings and
Yes.
you believe in bringing the artisans and our rural culture, tradition, art all together, and you want to make sure that we retain all of that and it does not get lost in our current modern culture. Over to you, Sean.
No, thank you so much for the introduction. Like you said, I'm not a trained artist. I went to business school in Germany, and I thought I'll end up working for a corporation or in my family business. But art was something that I was always attracted to. Since I remember, I was painting. But with Srinathji, this has been something where I had this great encounter at the temple, and then I fell in love with the bright colors and everything, and I started painting more seriously. when I moved back to India from Germany in 2003. So I've been painting seriously since then. And now, of course, it's my profession. That's what I do. And along with painting, I also do interiors, and I also curate shows, exhibitions, etc. Not just with art, but with a lot of craft and artisans. I like to work with craftsmen. That's my motivation in my life. I really like to use old dying craft and maybe repurpose them, find another use for them, in other articles that are, but not let the art or craft die. That's my, main purpose and intention.
So tell us something about your experience when you have been working with these artists. What is it that made you want to work with them? Yes, you like it, but something further, the human interest in that. So what is it that artisans look for? What do they expect? What have you found having worked with them?
Right. I think there is a large amount of old crafts are already dead. Because of course, modern intervention, inventions and machinery, and maybe no use of them. For example, palki making, these palanquins that were used to carry queens from one part of the fort to the other, or from one, not, useful anymore. But there was a whole big karkhana, whole big industry that, was just making these beautiful, intricately carved with wood, with sandalwood, with mirrors, with jewels, these beautiful, palanquins, and they're not in use anymore. A lot of such things that are not in use anymore. So my main, and I am really, impressed in, totally in love with these old things, these old crafts that were, a form of livelihood for many people. So I'm trying to find these craftsmen. I'm trying to make other purposes. For example, the beautiful, intricate, jali work, carving that you used to do on palanquins, I'm trying to do them on belt buckles or photo frames. So at least the craft is not dying. The craftsmen are still making those things, but maybe not on the kind of product that they were earlier, manufacturing or producing. So that is my main motivation. I myself in love with craft, and I feel that craftsmen need a platform, craftsmen need a space, craftsmen need design intervention. There's a divine intervention, and then there is a design intervention. And I think that the craftsmen need design intervention. They need people, creative people, to come up with ideas, to think of how to use this craft in another way. For example, the craft of mirror work, which used to be used in palaces on the ceilings and on the walls, to enhance the light of the candles or the diyas, these lamps that were used for electricity at that time, are not in use anymore. But I'm trying to repurpose them, trying to use them in other modern contemporary forms, so that they can be used as accent pieces, or just frames, photo frames again, a lot of other things, candle stands, door frames, just art, or just one accent wall in your house. So there is a growing interest. I feel in the last 5-6 years, I've seen that most of these craftsmen's children didn't want to learn the craft. But now I feel that because there is a lot of demand, and these heritage hotels and other things that are coming up are trying to use the craft. Some of these crafts are getting a platform, and some of these crafts are kind of surviving. It's a very difficult, because there's so many technically advanced machinery that is now available and hand work is obviously expensive. So, but the whole generation, a whole community dies out when there is no work. So I think that somehow I feel that I've been able to do some kind of design intervention and create some, platform for the craftsman.
That is so
I also
wonderful.
use a lot of craft in my own paintings.
Uh-huh.
My own paintings, I embroider, I stitch, I use mirror work, I use, so I think that is where everything comes together with my own art. So I paint, like you said, Srinathji, and I'm very impressed by the deity, the temple. I'm not so much into spirituality of it, but I'm more about the aesthetics of that place. I mean, I haven't come across, I've traveled a lot, I haven't seen a place with such, aesthetic sense. So, I mean, there's a lot of attention to detail, whether it is the pitchwai, the cloth that hangs behind Srinathji, the deity, or the jewelry, or the food and the music. There is a lot of detail. And I feel that somehow these kind of places are keeping the tradition alive. These kind of places are helping the tradition, from not dying a slow death. Which is happening in most other temples and most other places, which were the center of cultural heritage. These places in India were the central, like the dancers, the Devdasis in the south. They were a cultural hub. Or in Odisha with the Konark Sun Temple, and they have the Odissi. They were all, somehow, kind of, or even the Sufi singers in Ajmer. It was all connected to religion in some way. Craft, art, dance, somehow was always connected to religion, in the early days. And that is where it has evolved and taken new shape, a new, arena altogether. Like Odissi dancers are now going out performing on the stage, and, a craftsman who are just making sandalwood, walls and other items for the temple, and now making other products for people. So I think that it starts from there and then it spreads out. And I feel that these kind of places are still keeping, some of the crafts, some of these traditions alive. And that's a great thing.
Certainly, it's so very inspiring, the work that you do. And you did mention that the next generation looks or seems interested in retaining that craft and art. But is this the cost of development, so to say, that people find that as a software developer, they can make much more than they can as an artist. So where would you think that we need to balance, and how do you think we need to balance? But Chan, I'm going to hold you for a second and see if Suchitra can join us, if she's done with the other session. Just a second,
great.
huh? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, she has finished and she will be able to join us for a few minutes.
Oh, that's great.
Because we have packed the sessions back to back, and unfortunately,
I know.
her session with Anupam Kher got delayed because he couldn't join in. So she'll be here with us. But yes, I was asking you about how these are balanced, the balancing of development and our culture. How does it happen? What do you see?
Yeah, you're right. I think both are very important. Both are very important for today's, I think Suchitra is here, are very, very important. But I feel that art, heritage, these are all linked to wellness in a way. When we see a beautiful piece of craft or painting, etc., these are all linked to wellness. For our own well-being, we need to have, to look at beautiful things and feel happy. We can't just look at development. I mean, I don't see a flyover and be like, oh, great, I feel so happy. But when I look at a piece of art, I really feel moved. I really feel, so I think both are important. There has to be people who kind of push the craftsman to produce, do better. There also has to be development on. So both balance, I think that is the responsibility of us citizens and us creative people as well as the technical people. And I think that we are doing a wonderful job. I feel that everyone's doing their own bit, doing a wonderful job.
Welcome, so Suchitra. We had to start because, we have another session starting at 7:10. So I was holding the fort. I was asking Shan a couple questions. You have another 2-3 minutes to have your questions with Shan, after which I'll announce the award. And Suchitra is a wellness programmer.
I want to ask the question that is very important to me, and that's about his muse. His muse is Srinathji, the childhood Krishna. And he's painted him in so many different moods, and he's curated the Krishna Pavilion for the Ambanis. So I want to know, is it your intimate relationship with the deity? That's what guides your art, Shan?
You know, actually the art came first. I was, I mean, I was very impressed with the art, but you know, I can't just do something without getting really into it. You know, if I'm painting, then I need to study, I need to read, I need to visit, I need to know everything about, I mean, as much as possible. Knowing everything is still impossible. I'm still learning, but my whole quest to do something is to really get deep inside. And as a process of doing that, I've kind of also become, I do my daily, you know, it's called Seva in Nathdwara, my service to my own little Laddu Gopal. I'm not a religious person. Like I do everything which is on, you know, against the books, so to say. But you know, I love my food, I love everything. But I feel that you know, I really get inside the aesthetics. I feel that I really love the aesthetics of doing these things, and I really get inside, you know, the role, and then I can paint and produce something better. I feel that that is my intention, and that is how, you know, so the art came first, and then my quest to really find the child deity, and now I'm really into it. I mean, you know, I breathe him, I see him, I feel like I'm always surrounded with ideas, you know, and I'm guided. So I feel that in a way that I really draw every inspiration, whether it is an interior project or the Krishna Pavilion that I designed, or many other projects. I feel in all my interior projects as well, I kind of bring in something from my relationship with Srinathji.
That's what happens when divinity meets art. But one more question. I want to ask how the COVID times have affected you as an artist. You know, are you painting less or more, and are your colors as bright? The hues still so vibrant?
You know, actually, COVID times have been very good, have been extremely good. You know, in everyday life, it was very difficult to balance my time between art and interiors and other things that I do, you know. But I feel that in COVID times, I was at home, I could really paint. And I have really enjoyed this time reading and painting. And thanks to my clients and the commission works that I had, you know, everybody was at home and free and thinking, oh, we should get a painting from Shan, which worked out very well for me. So I had a lot of commission work that I completed. And it was a great time to self-reflect. It was a great time to create something new. And I had a lot of peace. And, you know, I knew I couldn't go out anywhere, and whatever resources I had. Initially, of course, to get paint and canvas and all that was a little difficult because I never stock as much. You know, because you never thought this kind of situation will also arise where you'll have to not be able to go and buy, you know, things that you take for granted. And these were not essentials. So you know, oil paints and canvas were not under essential services. So it was a bit difficult in technical terms, but in terms of art and creativity, I'm still really enjoying myself, and I'm really happy with the new.
See, this is the grace of Srinathji, you know. Yes. And I love your Chitra Seva. My name is Suchitra, so I just love that what you said about Chitra Seva. So
I have to come in now, Shan and Suchitra,
I'm
because
so
I've had this wonderful conversation. But I have to step in. Yes. And before I end the session, it is my privilege on behalf of WEF 2020 to confer the Iconic Leader Creating a Better World for All award on Shan Bhatnagar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Your soft copy of the award will be emailed to you in a week's time. We cannot send you a hard copy because of the current situation. It has been such a privilege to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.